to another MADFLIX Movie Reviews. And today's movie review is going to be of one of my all-time favorite movies, Blast from the Past, which is truly underrated. Starring Brendan Fraser, Alicia Silverstone, Christopher Walken, Sissy Spacek, Dave Foley, and Joey Slotnick. So the movie takes place around like the 1950s or the 1960s, around that era. And it starts off with Christopher Walken's character as Calvin and Sissy Spacek's character as Helen. They're a married couple who end up having a bunch of friends over the house. And Christopher Walken's character Calvin, he's like very political. He's like this genius guy. And he became an inventor, and his friends, they kind of question him about certain things, like how is he and what kind of characteristics does he have. So he just became this genius who's been working on secret projects where he doesn't even let the government know what he's working on, and he kind of distanced himself from, I guess, the place where he used to work, and he started inventing things all on his own. And he created a fallout shelter in case of an emergency. So they happen to have this gathering, and you can check that out right here.
A duck walks into a drugstore. He says, "I'd like some lip gloss." The clerk says, "Certainly, sir. Will this be cash or check?" The duck says, "Put it on my bill." Huh?
Brother. He was the golden boy.
I love that joke about the duck, put it on my bill. And you can see the guy who was there at the bar. He laughs, but he's like extremely serious. Like his face just changes. So at this point in time, Calvin and Helen, they have about over 40 guests in their house. And the TV's on. And everybody's watching the TV because John F. Kennedy is making a statement on TV stating that some kind of war is about to break out. And Calvin, being the person that he is, very political, he wants everybody to be safe. He cuts the evening short and lets everybody know that hopefully this war thing will resolve itself. So as the guests are leaving out of the house, Calvin is standing outside and he hears a fighter jet kind of zooms by. So he kind of salutes the jet and says good luck, I guess, on the journey wherever they're supposed to go. So at this point in time, he goes back into the house, and him and his wife, they're trying to get things together and get things ready because he built a fallout shelter and he wants his wife and him to be safe because he feels just in case if there's a radioactive bomb, then everybody would be cooked and they would be the only ones, I guess, alive. So there's a jet that's actually flying and it's experiencing engine trouble. So the pilot has no choice but to eject. And as he's getting ready to eject out of the plane with no pilot, of course, starts falling straight down. And as this plane is coming down at a very high velocity speed, it crashes into the Weber's house. And as it crashes into the house, Calvin and Helen, they just made it. And it kind of just caved in, I guess, the entrance that they had went down in. And his wife falls over. So his wife is pregnant. And he picks his wife up, he tells her, "Are you okay?" And she says, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh my God, like all of my friends." And Calvin is like burnt to a crisp. So he thinks everybody's toast because that was the bomb that just went off and it wiped, I guess, everybody out. So at this point in time, he's really happy to be in the fallout shelter. He built it to look exactly as their home. And he considers it home. And his wife finds it creepy because she really doesn't like to be there. So at this point in time, she's pregnant and he delivers the baby. Finally, she has the baby, and now the years are starting to kind of go by. At this point in time, maybe about a year or two, like construction starts to begin. And where their house used to be, the foundation, they're going to build some kind of mom and pop's mulch shop. And this is in between, I guess, like the 60s, like middle 60s. And it's kind of like some kind of soda shop. And this is where Joey Slotnick comes in. And Joey Slotnick, he also played in Pirates of Silicon Valley, which was a TNT movie that was released, and it's a story about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. So you can see that right here.
He figured out this little whistle that you found in boxes of Captain Crunch cereal had the same tones as AT&T's long-distance equipment.
So that was Joey Slotnick playing the role of Steve Wozniak in the movie Pirates of Silicon Valley. It's a very underrated movie. If you've never seen the movie, try to stream it on Netflix if they have it, or Hulu, or definitely Amazon. They should have it on their Prime Video. And I remember watching that movie back in 1999, and I actually recorded it with my VHS, and they were just giving it back to back to back. So Pirates of Silicon Valley stars Noah Wiley as Steve Jobs, and he really does look like Steve Jobs. And then you have Anthony Michael Hall portraying the role of Bill Gates. Again, it's a very underrated movie, which I truly did enjoy. If you want to know more about the real story with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, I would suggest watching a documentary called Trying for the Nerds. I definitely recommend it. It's a really good documentary, and it's really based off the real Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. It's not like Pirates of Silicon Valley. Of course, that's a movie that's just based off of them. But again, very underrated movie, and that documentary is extremely good. So back to Blast from the Past. So as they get the malt shop built, Joey Slotnick is like a soda jerk. He's just working with his mom. His mom hired him, and he's serving soda to these kids and milkshakes and stuff like that. And his mom is paying him like $1 an hour, and that's crazy to think during that era. That's, you know, people were getting paid like that. So yeah, then as the years go by, the shop is starting to slowly change and turn into like a rock and roll gothic kind of, you know, bar where they now serve beer. And, you know, his mom is saying how she misses the old Flower Power kids and the old days. And then little by little, the years are going by, and the bar is starting to kind of, it's starting to get worse. Like, you know, the neighborhood is basically going downhill from there. And at this point in time, you know, the mother's really exhausted out of all the years she put in to work in the shop. And she decides that she wants to sell the place, and her son is like, well, if you sell me the place, you know, I'll buy it from you. She just gives him the place, and somehow he ends up holding it down, and, you know, little by little he can't really maintain the rent, and he kind of becomes homeless living in that malt shop place, as you will, or a bar, as you will call it. So during this point in time, you know, you fast forward, and now we have Brendan Fraser, who's 35 years old, and he's never seen the world. He's never met a woman. So his parents are celebrating his 35th birthday, and as they're celebrating his birthday, you know, they finally show Brendan Fraser, hell of an actor, and so is Christopher Walken and Sissy Spacek. So now they're celebrating the birthday, and his father, again, he's an inventor, so he made some changes to his roller skates and kind of made rollerblades before rollerblades were even invented. And you can check that scene out right here.
What the heck are these?
It's your roller skates. Yep. I redesigned them.
These are really swell.
Now that's an awesome dad. So as they cut the cake, they're eating, they're having a conversation, and that's when Calvin mentions that he's really going to miss the fallout shelter. And his wife gets up from the table, she excuses herself, gets up from the table, and, you know, Brendan Fraser, Adam, gets up, and so does Calvin. They get up, but she's telling them, no, no, please stay. So they leave her alone, and they sit back down. As she walks to the back, she just yells this scream out, and you can check that out right here. So yeah, you could see that she really wasn't happy when he said that he's really going to miss that place, the fallout shelter. I mean, anybody would be bugging out after 35 years just being underground. So during the present day, they all end up going to sleep. And as they're sleeping, this noise wakes them up. So Calvin wakes up, and Helen wakes up, and then Adam wakes up. And that's the door which is unlocking itself. So Calvin and Helen, they go to investigate, and they find out that the lock actually unlocked itself, and the door is now open, which leads to the elevator. And at this point in time, Helen is asking Calvin, can we just go on up? And he's like, no, this is when we have to really be cautious and careful about the situation. So Adam is there, and but they're happy. His mom and his pops, they start dancing and stuff, and he's like bugging out, and he's like, you know, like, what the hell are they doing, kind of like. And you can check that scene out right here.
I know you're happy.
So yeah, you can see that they're all happy. So at this point in time, this is when Calvin decides to throw on a radioactive suit, and he decides to use the elevator. And now the shot goes to the bar where you have Joey Slotnick, who's talking to, I guess, his friend. And again, they're living in this bar, which used to be the malt shop. And now his friend is like, oh my God, there's like an earthquake. So that's when Calvin comes out through the floor, of the bottom of the floor, into the elevator. And Joey Slotnick, he passes out because he's like, oh God, he like passes out and falls. And as he's behind the bar, that's when Calvin puts the flashlight on him, and he tells him, leave my elevator alone. So now he's going out to experience the world and what has changed. And many things have changed dramatically, because now this is the year 1999. So he's questioning what happened to my backyard. He's like just really bugging out, and it's nighttime, it's raining. So he has his flashlight, and he sees that there's other people alive walking around. So now at this point in time, you have this prostitute. It's a guy dressed as a woman, and he's looking for a light to light a cigarette. And so he walks up to Calvin and says, you have a light? And Calvin says, yeah. So he lights the cigarette up, and he decides to ask the prostitute, you survived the blast? And you can check this conversation out right here.
And be a girl. Hell, I can be whatever you want me to be.
Really?
Uh-huh. And it's all yours for the remarkably low price of $200. And if you act now, I may even throw in some free lawn furniture. Now, how about that?
So that conversation, you can see he's already bugging out because the prostitute is offering himself to Calvin. And again, the prostitute can be both male and female, and he's like really bugged out about this, and he refuses the service and says no. And finally he sees that there's a porn shop, and as he sees the porn shop, he like, that's it, like he had enough. So he goes back underground, and he's telling his wife that, you know, that there are survivors up there, but something's wrong with the world where people can point guns and, you know, and he's talking about the prostitute now and this part of the scene and the way he's describing the prostitute. Take a look at Helen's face. It's just priceless. I swear I love that because, oh my God. Check this scene out right here.
They offer lawn furniture as a come-on.
The way she was washing that sink, oh my God. So anyway, so now, you know, he starts explaining that they can't go above ground because of all these things that's going on. So Helen decides to ask him, so what do? Do we stay down here? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm sure that those people would kill each other and, you know, whatever's gonna happen. So at this point in time, his wife Helen is like, I don't care what you say. I want to go above ground. You know, we deserve to go up. you know, me, Adam, I don't care how horrible it is up there. She wants to go up. And for some bizarre reason, Calvin just wants to live in that fallout shelter. Like, he really loves that fallout shelter. And, you know, that's the real reality, that he wants to stay down there and live with them forever. So as he's engaging in this argument with his wife, he somehow ends up having a heart attack and falls on the table. And Brendan Fraser is looking at his pops like, Dad, are you okay? And he's like grabbing his chest. He's on the table. So I guess he had a mild heart attack with all the stress of seeing the changes in the world would happen. So at this point in time, his wife, she's outside of the bedroom. She comes out and she tells Adam, you know, your father's going to be fine. I think he had a heart attack. And, you know, so she's mentioning that she needs supplies. And she's like, look, you know, I don't know if the money we have here, they basically have this money kind of like in this lockbox in water. So he volunteers to go, and she tells him to make this list and just state that you're here on business. And she's telling him, write that down. So she gives him money, and she's telling him all the things that he needs to pick up. He makes a list, and he's writing all of these things down. So finally, he ends up, you know, going above. And as he goes above, he sees Joey Slotnick, excuse me. And he's like, were you the one that was dressed in yellow last night? And he tells him, no, that was my father. He was like, oh, the father, right. And he has this sign that says, leave my elevator alone, because he considers Adam's father as God. So he's like praying. So Adam is like, you know where the exit is? And he's like, yeah, right out there. So at this point, Adam decides to step out with his briefcase. And as he steps out, he's like just bugging out because he can't believe how beautiful the world is. And he's looking at the sky, and he sees this little girl, and he's like, I've never seen anything like it, or like you. And then he sees this black female postal service worker, and he says this.
Oh, my lucky stars! A Negro!
Say what?
How do you do, ma'am?
So you could see he was really bugging out about meeting a black person because he's never seen a black person. The female postal service worker, she was just hilarious. So his father told him, if you find an adult bookstore, do not go into the adult bookstore, poisonous gas. So he sees it and he starts yelling out, poisonous gas, run for your life. He's telling everybody to run. So you got people running. So finally he ends up on this bus, and he's on this city bus talking to this guy, and he tells the guy that the driver seems upset that the bus driver, he could try to give the bus driver money, $100, and the bus driver didn't want to take it. So he's like, seems like everybody's upset. So the bus starts to move. He's telling everybody, whoa, this is public transportation. Hold on, everybody, hold on. And this old couple's just looking at him like he's crazy. So as he's talking to the guy next to him, he's telling the guy, I need to find a liquor store, a supermarket, and a standing Holiday Inn. And he tells the guy sitting next to him, do you have a gun? And the guy says like, yes. He nods yes. And he's like, well, thank you for not waving it around. And then finally he tells the bus driver to stop. And he's telling the bus driver to stop the bus. So the bus driver then stops the bus. He ends up in a supermarket, and he's starting to talk to the guy. I guess the guy from the meat market section, and he's telling him that he has this huge list, but you know, he needs to get all these supplies. And the guy then tells him, you can have a meat order delivered to your house, you know, that large. And he's like really bugging out about it, like, really? And the guy tells him, yeah. So at this point, this is when Adam realizes that he can't find his way home, that he's lost. So he then again ends up on the city bus, and now it's nighttime, and as he's on this bus, you know, he thinks he might have found where his home is. So he sees an adult bookstore. He tells the bus driver to stop the bus. He then gets off that bus, and at this point in time, you know, he's like trying to figure out if this is where he had came from. Was it from here? But it's not matching up. So then he sees that there's a baseball store there. So he now enters the baseball card store and he's talking to the owner. And he shows the owner the baseball cards that he has, and he tells him these are much older than the ones you have on the window. And at this point in time, the owner sees like this is a great cash grab, like I could sucker this guy and take all the good cards that are worth who knows how much, and I could just like shortchange this dude. So he tells him, what are you looking for? And you know, Adam tells him, well, I'm looking for like, you know, something small bills, like ones, fives, something like that. And of course, that's when Alicia Silverstone, she plays the role of as Eve, and she comes out and she's realizing her boss is trying to sucker this guy. So at this point in time, that's when she decides to use the word shit, and Brendan Fraser is like in all awe. Like you could tell like he fell in love with her right away. Matter of fact, you could check the scene out right here.
Bonsoir, mademoiselle.
Oh, you're French?
Say, did you just lose your job back there because of me?
Oh, forget about it. I'm sick of working for that dickhead.
Dickhead?
Yeah, it's a walking penis capable of intelligent speech. A dickhead. What?
So that was a really cool scene. And, you know, especially with the part with the dickhead, the way he fell. Like, he was trying to envision a walking, talking dickhead, which is crazy. That's the reason why he dropped the cards, and I love this movie because, again, this movie is so underrated. So, at this point in time, you know, Eve is trying to help Adam, and she's explaining to him, like, she's kind of like psychic, so she's guessing where he's staying. And she guesses all these things right, including the Holiday Inn. So Adam then asks Eve if she has a car. She says, rule number 1, no strangers in the car. So he's like, well, if it makes you feel any better, I don't have a gun. So he kind of scares her with that. She starts running. He then chases her down and apologizes, takes out a baseball card and says, look, I will give you Roger Hornsby. And she's like, well, the card is worth like $6,000. And he's like, that's fine, you can have it if you just drop me off at the hotel. She's like, all I got to do is drop you off, and I don't have to take a ride on your spaceship. She's kind of just messing with him, and he just doesn't get it. So at this point in time, she drives him to the Holiday Inn, and as she's dropping him off, he gets his stuff, and he's about to ask her a question, and she just takes off rudely and just takes off. So he then goes to the receptionist in the Holiday Inn so he can book a room, and the lady says, I'll need to see a card. And he's like, oh, a card, right. He takes out a baseball card, and he's assuming that's the card she wants to see. Anyway, so he ends up in the hotel. Now it's morning. He's watching some kind of commercial with these girls wearing a bikini, and then the phone goes off, and it's actually Eve calling him. So he's all happy, and she tells him, meet me downstairs. So finally they're talking, and as he's talking to her in the lobby, he's all happy, like, I can't believe she's talking to me. He's really digging her. And so she's telling him, listen, I can't take your baseball card because this is just too much. And he just insists on her taking it, and she's like, no, take it back. So then she's walking away like, well, this is the end. And she mentions Troy. Troy is played by David Foley, or Dave Foley. And Adam questions her, like, is that your boyfriend, your husband? She says no, and he's like, oh, thank you. He's yelling all this out in the lobby. And you can check the scene out right here.
Who's Troy? Is he your husband or a boyfriend?
No.
Thank you!
So that was a really cool scene. I mean, you can tell, like, he really likes her a lot. So anyway, so at this point in time, she's mentioning to him as she's walking away that she needs to find a job. And he's like, why don't you come work for me instead? She's like, doing what? He's like, helping me get food and supplies. And she's like, for starving people? He's like, well, they're not starving yet, but they do need help. So he decides to hire her, and she's like, well, if you're gonna hire me, I need to make at least $1,000 a week. And he's like, no problem, you got it. So they meet up and they get the supplies from the supermarket, everything that they need to get. And at this point in time, they go to the storage locker. And as they're there at the storage locker, you know, Adam decides that he wants to ask Eve out. And as he's asking her out, you know, he politely asks her, you know, thank you for really helping me, because without you, I would have been lost. And she's like, well, you know, you're welcome. She's not really too interested in him. And she's just like brushing him off. And as he's getting ready to tell her, listen, I think you and I, and she's just like, no. But you can check that scene out right here.
I think that you and I...
Adam, don't even think about it, okay? I'm sorry, I know that sounds mean, but believe me, it'd be a lot meaner if I didn't say it, okay? Okay?
Okay.
Let's take this truck back, and I'm hungry.
Wow. I mean, you can see how hurt he was. And as she's walking away, he actually checked her legs out. And he was just like, he had like this look on his face. Anyway, so as they're driving on the highway, you know, they're driving, and he mentions to her that, you know, if she can help him. And she's like, with what? He's like, it might sound crazy. And she's like, I'm sure it will. Like, again, she's just coming out really harsh and mean. And he's like, forget it, never mind. And so now she kind of just like rubs his arm and she says sorry. So he wants to find a wife because he doesn't want to be alone. And Eve then explains to Adam that, you know, marriage sucks and it bites the big one because everybody's divorced. And, you know, that you don't really need to be married. You don't need to be alone, but you don't need to be married neither. So they hit the restaurant, and as they're about to eat, you know, you have the waiter there, or the waitress, whoever that was that brought them the food, and he's like, what do you mean you can get me laid? So it's like, again, he doesn't, you know, he doesn't understand because he's been locked up in the fallout shelter for 35 years, so he doesn't even know what that means. And she's like, can we talk about that later? And so he prays and whatever. And so after they end up, you know, having the food, eating, and just talking from there. And then it's like she ends up driving to where she lives. And this is the part where Adam ends up meeting Eve's ex-boyfriend. And the guy, I forgot his name, but he plays in the TV show Castle. He's in this movie. And so this is the part where Adam finally gets to meet her ex-boyfriend, and you can check that scene out right here.
Oh, you came back for your underwear.
Excuse me, these are Ralph Lauren's.
How'd you get it?
No, I was going to ask you why Cliff likes to wear another man's underpants.
What?
So at this point in time, this is where Adam gets to meet Troy, who's played by Dave Foley. And now they're all having drinks, Adam, Eve, and Troy. And they're all getting to know each other. So Troy wants to know where Adam is from. And he's like, maybe Eve can guess. She's psychic. And she takes his hand and she starts stroking his hand. And as she does that, he takes a gulp nervously. And she's like, are you okay? He's like, yeah. So then she says what he's here for. After that, Troy is like, that's it? He was like, yeah, she was right about all of that. So now they start talking about the state Russia, who owned it before them. And Adam is including his father in that. And he starts saying, you know, these different names and stuff. And then he's like, well, who owned it before Russia? And he says Anchorage or whatever it is. And so then Troy can't believe what he's saying. And then Troy goes to check the computer in the room. So Adam is bugging out. Like, he's like, he has a computer? And he's telling this to Eve. And Eve's like, yeah. And he's like, he has a computer in the house? And she's like, no, it's in the backyard. So he's like bugging out. And she's like, yeah, of course, it's in the room. And so he starts to excuse himself. And he's telling her, can I please be excused? She's like, yeah. So at this point in time, now you see Helen. She has a drink in her hand, and she checks on her husband. He's sleeping, and as curious as she is, she decides to take the elevator to go up. And as she goes up, she has a drink in her hand. She still has her drink. And that's when she sees the people that Joey Slotnick brought in to help him pray and stuff. And she bugs out when she turns around. And he's like, you know, who are you? And Helen says, I'm the mother. So everybody's like, it's the mother. It's the mother. And she's bugging out. She like drops the drink and now she takes the elevator back down. You can check that scene out right here. So you could see that Helen was not having it when she saw all those people that was praying, leave my elevator alone, or it's the mother. And she was like, oh hell no. She dropped the drink and just went right back down on the ground. So at this point in time, this is where Troy takes Adam shopping, and they come out of the car and they got all these shopping bags and stuff. And so Adam is asking Troy all these questions, and he's like, well, you know, I suppose they built a freeway like in 6 months. And Troy is telling him, yeah, you know, they pretty much built it like in 6 months. And Adam is bugging out about it. And he's like, what about those buildings? Are they new? He's like, yeah. So Adam is like, wow, recovery is impressive. And Troy is like, recovery? But it's, again, you know, Troy has no idea that Adam was in the fallout shelter for 35 years. So now they go into the house. And as they go into the house, you know, they got the shopping bags, and Eve is sitting there. I think she was painting her nails.
No, first let's show her these. Huh? Eve, can I skate around your block?
How about it, Eve? Can you skate around your block?
No.
Just a few laps.
It won't take long.
No.
So at this point in time, this is where Troy takes Adam to a baseball game. And as Adam is watching the game, he finally realizes and he understands it. And he's like, you have to see it to understand it. And he's like clapping, and, you know, he's like really happy about it. So now at this point in time, he's sitting outside of Eve's house in the backyard where it's raining. And he's just there soaked up and just sitting there in the rain. And Eve comes out, she approaches him, and she then tells him that finding a wife is like kind of ridiculous, right? Like she's telling him, do you still want to go girlfriend hunting and stuff? He's like, yeah. So she's like, you know, finding a wife, that's kind of ridiculous, you know, don't you think? And he's like, no, it's not. So they kind of get into this small miniature argument. You can kind of see that Eve is feeling sort of a certain way about him. Because she's already mentioning, you know, like finding a wife is like ridiculous. But anyway, you can check that scene out right here.
This whole business of finding a wife, it's pretty ridiculous, don't you think?
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. A girlfriend maybe, but a wife, it's...
Well, then help me find a girlfriend. That's all I ask. I'll tell you what, I'll give you every single card I've got.
Screw you! You think I'm just somebody you can buy off?
So yeah, after that mini argument, they end up in the club. And this is like my favorite scene. Because at this point in time, this is when they're entering the club. And Adam is all like bugging out. And because, you know, he's never really been in a club. So he's like, oh wow, this is really amazing, the club and this and that. So Eve is telling him just, you know, like, just be yourself, whatever. And this is the part where Sophie comes in, and she's like this girl who already, she's mentioning who's the hunk. She's talking about Adam, and you can check that out right here.
Adam lives in Alaska.
No shit.
Vous parlez français?
Oui.
Moi, je parle un peu de français.
Oh, you speak beautiful French.
Français
Si tu veux, nous pouvons pratiquer beaucoup de choses ensemble.
Oui.
So at this point in time, after that conversation with Sophie, Eve pulls Adam away because she doesn't really want Sophie to get to Adam. So they end up seeing this blonde girl who's sitting by the hors d'oeuvre table, and, well, she's standing by the hors d'oeuvre table, and they tell him, listen, go for her, you know, she seems sweet. So Eve says lie if need be. And so now he's gets up and he's gonna get ready to approach the girl, and you can check the scene out right here.
Yeah, that's a great one.
This is my new friend.
Hi. Adam Weber.
Hi, I'm Heather.
Heather.
Yeah.
I don't believe I've ever heard that name before.
So you could see how he said that he never heard the name Heather before. And this is the part that's one of my favorites because this is the dance scene. And this is the point where Heather asks him, do you dance? And he's like, well, I took a dance lesson, you know, every day of my life up until a couple of days ago. And you can check this dancing out right here.
Looks like a king and he acts like a star. When we see him drive by, he goes toot toot. We all shout, hey Mr. Zoot Zoot. He's got purple suspenders and a yellow tie.
Is that your girlfriend?
No. Will you please excuse me?
Wow, that dance scene was incredible. That is one of my favorite dance scenes in the movie. That is like my favorite scene. And you can see that Eve got jealous when Adam was dancing with those two girls. And at the point where they were finished dancing, Adam was about to have a threesome with those girls if he would have went home with them. But again, he didn't know what that was. That's when Eve whistles, calls him up, and one of the girls are like, is that your girlfriend? And he says no. So Heather's like all excited, like, oh my God. And he excuses himself from talking to the women. And he goes back to talk to Eve. Eve is extremely pissed off now. Now she's got feelings for him, but she's really angry because she starts questioning him, where the hell did you learn to dance like that? You're not from Alaska and there are no starving people. So Adam now gets the vibe that she's really upset at him. And he's like, why are you mad? And he's like, look, I'll tell you the truth. And as he's about to talk and say when the bomb was dropped, that he was living in a fallout shelter, but he didn't have a chance to say it because his conversation with Eve was interrupted by Cliff. Cliff shows up, and as Cliff shows up, Adam gets up from his chair to shake his hand, and as he shakes his hand, that's when Cliff takes Adam's seat, and now Adam is talking to Eve, and as Adam is about to talk, you know, Cliff cuts him off and tells Eve, how about a drink at the bar? And she then looks at Adam, looks at Cliff. She agrees to have a drink with Cliff. So now they're leaving Adam right there by the booth. And that's when Cliff tells him, the chairs are yours now. And Adam is like, yeah, okay. You know, Adam has to talk to Eve. So he then gets up from the booth and starts looking for Eve. And Troy is walking around. And then now you have Eve with Cliff at the bar. And they're taking shots. And this is the part where Adam decides to talk to Eve. And you can check that scene out right here.
I must warn you, Cliff, I do know how to defend myself. Or do you?
Stop it, you two!
I'm leaving. Eve,
Probably a good idea.
I'm sorry.
So you could see at this point Eve is just playing games as he's explaining everything he had to say to Eve. You know, Adam defended himself from Cliff. And you can see that she warned him that the punch was coming. And he really took care of Cliff and embarrassed Cliff. So now she's upset and she's at the house. And this is the point where Troy is coming back from the club. And she wants to know what's going on. Like, where's Adam at? She's curious to know about where he's at. So at this point in time, Troy is like, well, he left. And that's when Eve is like, oh, he left with the girls that were the, that were the dancers, right? And Troy is like, no, he didn't leave with them. And that's when Eve got happy, thinking, oh, cool, he like went to the hotel by himself. And that's when Troy breaks it down to Eve that Adam left with Sophie, which is the girl who was speaking French to him in the club. And Eve lets out this major scream. And now she wants to go and get Adam out of Sophie's house. And she tells Troy, you coming? Troy was like, hell no, Sophie will kill me. So Eve gets into the car and she gets ready to turn the engine on. That's when Adam shows up. And this happens. So you could see this is where Eve got scared. She tumbles out of the car and her knee got cut, so her sweats got ripped on one part of the knee where she got cut. And now she's just going off on Adam, telling Adam you're supposed to be having unsafe sex with that slut Sophie. And Adam is just apologizing. I don't even know why he's apologizing, but he does say he's sorry. And she's just going off on him for no reason. This is when Troy tells Adam, listen, you know, you're a nice boy. What Eve needs is a nice man. So he decides to go upstairs and go to sleep. So now Adam is with Eve. And as they sit by the coffee table, he's checking on her wound. And he sees that she has the cut. And he's like, okay, your pants are really dry. And he kind of rips the sweats more, takes the peroxide, and kind of just like puts it on her cut. And at this point in time, you know, he's like kind of like drying the peroxide, you know, by blowing on her knee, and she kind of gets turned on or whatever. And the explanation, finally Adam decides to come in with the explanation to tell her what went down from the beginning. And you can check that scene out right here.
My dad said that if I found a healthy young girl, that I should bring her on down. Why, Eve, you look plenty healthy to me.
That part was really hilarious with the Eve, you look plenty healthy to me. And just the fact of him inviting Eve to live down there in the fallout shelter with his parents was enough to have Eve really bugging out. And Eve felt really scared, and it felt creepy to her. So the next day, Adam is with Troy, and they're driving the truck. And Adam sees from the opposite side of the street the adult bookstore that looks familiar to him. He stops the truck to get out and look at the adult bookstore. He's looking at the adult bookstore like, this looks familiar. I think this is where the fallout shelter is. And right next door, he goes into the bar and he sees Joey Slotnick there with his church group. And he's like, steps right out. And that's when he realizes he found his house. He found home. So he goes back to the truck. Him and Troy are driving, and they're driving back to Eve's house. And as they get to Eve's house, there's actually a surprise there for Adam. Adam, not knowing that Eve called Family Social Services on him, Adam is all bubbly and happy. He's like, hi, Eve. And the woman from the social services, she introduces herself and her co-worker. So Troy is like bugging out, and they're having that conversation now. The social worker's having the conversation with Adam, and she's like, Eve told me you was living in a bomb shelter your whole life, and he was like, fallout shelter. And so at this point, this is when the woman from the social services wants to take him down to the office. And Adam proceeds to say, well, you know, can we talk tomorrow? I'm going to be really busy today. And so he realizes that, damn, this is not a good idea to talk to her. So he kind of just tells Eve, listen, I found home today and I know where home is. And if I could just go back home, I promise I'll never bother any of you guys ever again. And that's when the woman from the social services decides to tell him, well, let's talk first. And he's like, yes, ma'am. So they step out, and that's when Adam does the run, and he decides to escape. And the co-worker is trying to catch Adam, but he can't catch him. The fat guy can't catch him. So as he's running around the block, that's when the social service worker, the female Nina, she decides to say she's going to call the police. And Eve is like, no, don't call the police. They'll come with their guns and, you know, and everything else. And so she takes the phone away from the social worker, Nina, and she's like, no, don't call them, you know. So this is when Adam runs to Eve and gives the keys for the storage and says, I mean, not the storage, the hotel, excuse me, and then says, go to the hotel, don't forget to get all my baseball cards, you can have everything that's there in the hotel. And at this point in time, Adam runs to the truck, backs up the truck in reverse, and hits Nina's car. the social family service person, and you can check that scene out right here. So at this time, this is when Adam goes back down to the fallout shelter, sees his parents, gives them a hug, and they're like, is everything okay? And he's like, no, I think I'm being chased by a psychiatrist. And Adam is with Joey Slotnick, which his character is called Archbishop Milker. So he then introduces himself to Adam's parents, and he says, we met previously. So Adam wants to get the food and the supplies, and he needs help. So that's when Joey Slotnick's character decides to help out with his church group, and they help him get all the food, the supplies out of the lockers. And that's when Troy is in the car with Eve. Eve is driving. They go down to the storage locker, but then they realize everything is all gone. It's all empty, and Adam is nowhere to be found in sight. So they end up going to the hotel. And as they go to the hotel, they're trying to, you know, collect all his stuff. They got to pay the bill for the hotel, and his baseball cards are there. And that's when Troy is kind of finding everything, like from the toothpaste, because the toothpaste I think says trademark 1963 or whatever. Anyway, so then he finds all of these stock certificates and the baseball cards. So he decides to call a number and get in touch with somebody who deals with stocks. And all the stocks that Adam has, his father gave him all those stocks, and those stocks are worth millions upon millions upon millions. So Troy explains to Eve that you meet this nice guy who comes into your life, and he's the nicest guy you met, he's rich, and you have him committed. And that's when Eve was like saying that, yeah, and I had him committed, and Troy's like, yes, you did. So Eve is like, well, at least I fell for him before I knew he was rich, right? So that's always a new one. Anyway, so at this point, they decide to talk about where is Adam's home, because Eve mentions that Adam had found home earlier, and Troy's like, oh yeah, he did. He stopped at this adult bookstore, and he seemed very excited to see it. And Eve was like, Adam was excited to see porn. So Troy is like, maybe his home is underneath the dirty bookstore. So they end up going to the porn shop. As they go in, they're like stomping on the ground, trying to find, I guess, the fallout shelter's door. And they're jumping up and down. And the guy who's working there looks at them like they're crazy. And you can check that scene out right here.
Adam?
So you could see how the clerk was looking at them. He was all bugged out. So then Eve and Troy, they ask about if there's a back door to like leave the store and stuff. So they end up leaving through the back exit, only to just miss Adam with Joey Slotnick, who's in the truck, helping him get all the supplies and stuff. They don't see the truck, they just missed him. Anyway, so, you know, Troy is explaining to Eve that there was none of this, you know, none of these things were here back then. It was just like homes and fruit orchards and stuff. So Eve says to Troy that she wants to go home, and Troy says, yeah, maybe he'll call. So at this point in time, Adam is actually leaving a message for Eve, thanking her that, you know, for all the help that she's done to help him. And at one point in the phone call, it's like he wants to say, I love you, but he can't really say it over the line. So he's just like, I just want to say thank you for all the help. And that's all. So at this point in time, Troy is driving the car. Eve is on the passenger side. She has his baseball cards. And they're driving, and then they see, you know, this homeless guy walking, this woman coming out of a bar throwing up. And they pass this phone booth, and Adam had just finished coming out of the phone booth. Eve spots him, and as she sees him, she just says, Adam. He looks back, she opens the door, she drops all his baseball cards, runs to him, and he just goes and grabs her. And then after that, they start kissing. And from that point on, you know, you could just tell Adam is like really happy, really amazed that all this has gone down. Now Eve is really down to meet Adam's parents. So she then heads down to the fallout shelter, and she does meet, you know, Adam's mom and Adam's dad. But they want to do one thing for the parents. And so as they're all happy to meet her, you know, they want them to stay for dinner. And Adam is all like, well, yeah, I guess we could stay. So Eve is getting to know Adam's mom, and they're cooking together and stuff. And she's saying she's from Pasadena and this and that. And so Adam's mom's just like hugs her. So after that, you know, Adam says, listen, you know, I'm gonna be leaving, but I need you guys to set the lock for 2 months. And I need you guys to trust me. And they're like, yeah, sure, of course. They end up going to the guy who knows about the stocks. And with the unlimited stocks, they have enough money to actually build his mom and dad a house. And they build them the house. And as they build them the house, they're down there in the fallout shelter. They don't really know what's going down. And finally, they get a house built. And the thing was to pick up Adam's mom and dad and explain to them that no bomb ever was dropped on their house. It was just a plane that crashed into their backyard. But they wanted to bring them to the surface slowly and then explain these things to them. And you can check that scene out right here.
Our idea was to bring Adam's parents up to the surface very slowly, make them very comfortable, and then break the bad news to them that there was no nuclear holocaust.
I truly love Blast from the Past. I watch it as many times as I can watch it. It's definitely a timeless classic and a very underrated movie. Brendan Fraser is one hell of an actor, and I remember his career skyrocketing like in the 90s, and he was just very well known. Then it was just like he was out of the spotlight for a minute. Fans even made a petition to help bring him back to TV and to movies. I mean, this guy has to come back. I wish he would have been in another Mummy movie, but unfortunately the Mummy movies, they took a toll on his body. But again, he's a hell of an actor. I love Brendan Fraser. I'm one of your biggest fans if you ever come across this video. Again, I'm one of your biggest fans, and I'm one of your biggest fans too, Alicia Silverstone. I loved you in Clueless, and loved you a lot in this movie. And Christopher Walken and Sissy Spacek, I'm a fan of you guys too. Love you guys because of the role you guys played. It was really beautiful. This movie, again, is very underrated. So I have the DVD right here, and here's the front cover of it. And this one's made out of cardboard, so the back took a beating, kind of indentations on it and dents and stuff. And opening it up, what I like is that you get the inside and it tells you what chapter is what. And here you have the DVD. And what's cool about the artwork is there's like little martini glasses on there. I actually show this when I got the Blu-ray version of Blast from the Past, which I have that right here. And I did the unboxing of this. So here's the front cover of the Blu-ray, and here's the back. And I'll put the link in the description for the unboxing of the Blu-ray. And the reason why I've been getting a lot of movies again on Blu-ray, some people might ask, and wondering why, is because I have a Plex server and I'm trying to upscale a lot of the movies to 1080p, where they will look way better than the DVD standard 720 by 480 format. Also, you have this, which my cousin got for me, and this is Blast from the Past soundtrack. If you've never heard any of the songs or anything like that, I would definitely recommend this soundtrack. The songs on here are really awesome. Let me try to see if I can bring that up close, that way you guys can see that. And then you have the inside, and that's what the disc looks like. Again, this is one movie that I love watching over and over again. It's just one of those timeless classics. It's just a shame that the movie didn't gross as much money as it should have. But, you know, like I said, for people who've never seen it, definitely I would say get your hands on it. Stream it from Hulu if you can, if they have it there, or Netflix, which I doubt, but Amazon should have it for sure. This movie's so underrated. I love this movie. Again, it's a timeless classic, and I'm always going to enjoy this movie. It definitely is a love comedy that should be seen and definitely not forgotten. Well, I hope you guys enjoy this MADFLIX Movie Reviews on Blast from the Past, and I'll catch you guys on the next MADFLIX Movie Reviews.